Hello and welcome to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. I am joined by Brenna Green from Coin 6, and we have an absolutely loaded show today. So, Brenna, I'm going to start at what I think is the obvious question, and it's a question that people have been asking for a very, very long time, but we rarely get an opportunity to ask here on the Oregonian Sports Podcast. And that question is, what are the Cleveland Browns doing?
There's a first for everything.
Okay, so the Browns draft Dillon Gabriel, the Ducks quarterback, had a great year in his one season in Eugene in the third round last week, 94th overall. And then 2 rounds later, on day 3, draft Shedeur Sanders, who took a precipitous fall in the draft, seen as a first rounder by most. A guy people expected to be starting in the NFL next year, falls to the 5th round, the 144th overall pick. Gabriel was the 5th quarterback selected. Sanders was the 6th quarterback selected. What do you make of the Browns drafting 2 quarterbacks? And most urgently for our listeners, what does this mean for Dillon Gabriel?
Well, I mean, when you have 5 quarterbacks, but yet no quarterback, that's a problem. So that's just kind of how it feels there. And that's not a slight at Gabriel whatsoever. It's a weird quarterback room.
It is.
Yeah. You've got Deshaun Watson, who is pretty much universally disliked and also is injured right now.
Always injured.
Always injured. Someone that the Cleveland Browns wanted to be the face of the franchise, and that epically backfired on them, and he will never be the face of the franchise now. There's just not enough public support for it. You've got Joe Flacco, who feels like he's playing on one leg because he's so old. No offense to Joe, just the reality. That's a fact. Kenny Pickett, who has never proven to be much in the NFL so far. And then Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. So in a weird way, this almost feels like a battle between Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. At least for the beginning of the season. Obviously, once Deshaun gets back happy, they're going to start their multi-million-dollar guy over them. Probably. He has not played well for them. So yeah, where I thought you were going to take that was a question that we've asked a lot. Who is better, Dillon Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders? Now we really get to find out. It's actually really fascinating. I mean, you have 2 Heisman finalists on the same team that play the same position. How often has that ever happened in an NFL draft?
Sure, that's a great point. I really find this to be an intriguing situation, and largely because, like, I completely understand. Like, the Browns are picking in the 5th round. It's a position of need. There's just a value proposition of getting a 1st round or 2nd round talent in the 5th round and getting a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders, who, is potentially a franchise player, is certainly going to, at minimum, I think is seen as a quality starter in the NFL with a lot of upside. I don't know that Dillon Gabriel projected by most teams as a starting level quarterback in the NFL. Like, there's a lot to like about Dillon Gabriel, but that's not really what his NFL projection has been. And so I can see how this is good for the Cleveland Browns. Like, I get that competition is good. I get that it's a position of need. I get that, there was a value on Shedeur. I get how it can be good for Shedeur. It's like he gets maybe humbled a little bit by this process, has good competition in camp. They don't necessarily have to rush him into a starting job right away. So I get how could be good for the Browns. I get how it could be good for Sanders. I just see no world where this was a good development for Dillon Gabriel, because there was a team that valued you higher than almost any other team would have, that used a 3rd round pick on you, that graded you above. I mean, there's a lot of teams that graded you above Shedeur Sanders, that wanted to draft a quarterback and graded you above Shedeur Sanders, and brought you in, and then Shedeur Sanders fell into their lap and they brought him in too. And sure, I guess Dillon Gabriel could beat out Shedeur Sanders and and prove the Browns right for using that third round pick, but it's all going to be about Shedeur now, and it's going to be a competition of like how did Shedeur look, and will Shedeur get reps? Will he play? Will he start? I mean, there could be an opportunity for a rookie to start for the Browns this year, as you laid out. Joe Flacco is
Absolutely.
1,000 years old. Deshaun Watson is done in Cleveland, and Kenny Pickett is after flaming out in Pittsburgh is just not really a viable long-term option there. But I just don't see how this is good for Dillon Gabriel, and I feel bad for him from the standpoint that you had a team that like believed in you, and presumably still does believe in you, but whether it was ownership or just the value proposition that the front office made, the stuff with Shedeur is not about talent. Like Shedeur's talent is there, and so if you're going head to head in practices, I mean, I just don't think this works out very well in Cleveland for Dillon Gabriel after this development.
I understand your thought process, but I guess it's one of those people where it's like people have bet against Dillon Gabriel time and again. Sure. And every time he ends up coming out on top. So I'm just not like quite willing to go to like the doomsday scenario for him and I think he's someone too who like obviously Shedeur is going to take motivation from this process, but I think having them pick Shedeur is a good way to really put a little extra oomph in Dillon Gabriel's step. And
I don't think Dillon Gabriel needed, competition is good for everybody.
Yeah.
I don't think Dillon Gabriel needs the extra oomph or the extra competition. Like, the reality is there's only so many reps. There's only so many practice reps to go around. Like, you've now basically split those. And look, Dillon is going to get the Browns have invested more in Dillon Gabriel than they've invested in Shedeur Sanders.
Correct.
They used a higher pick. They're going to be paying him more money. Therefore, they are more invested in him than they are in Shedeur. So, when you're talking about like the depth chart going into, summer workouts and fall camp, Dillon is going to be, whatever, third and Shedeur should be fourth or fifth or whatever. But I just feel pretty strongly that, talent will rise above here. And if Shedeur has been humbled by this, if Shedeur does take the competition seriously, like I think this is going to be a good situation for him, and it's going to, unfortunately, probably, box out Dillon Gabriel in a way he wouldn't have anticipated when, hey, the Cleveland Browns really like you and they want to draft you in the third round.
I understand what you're saying, but NFL scouts clearly say that his talent isn't as good as the outside world thought he was, because 32 teams continually pass on him again and again.
Again, I just don't think that was all a talent proposition.
It's not all a talent proposition, but that's not what the quarterback position is.
No, of course not. No, of course not. And like this, but like when you're already dealing with a crowded quarterback stable, and you're talking about bringing in a young quarterback to develop as maybe a future of the franchise quarterback, I just don't think it's good for Dillon. I don't think it's going to be good for Dillon's development, and I'm just not sure that his future is going to be in Cleveland ultimately, which is fine. Like, I mean, hey, the competition's good. He develops, he gets better, gets up to speed on the NFL game, and maybe it ends up needing to be somewhere else. That's great. I just think it was a bummer development for him upon his arrival into the NFL.
Well, hey, maybe it's a good thing that if what you say is true, maybe it's a good thing that his future isn't in Cleveland, because Lord knows they have had absolutely horrendous quarterback luck there. So maybe that's maybe in a weird way it's a positive.
what was Dion's tweet from like 8 years ago?
It
Basically
was,
saying like
I
no
like what
quarterback
they
should
did
ever.
in the offseason, but if I was a quarterback, I wouldn't go there.
Yeah, no way I'd go to Cleveland. I'd pull an Eli Manning if possible. Uh, Shedeur does not have the leverage to pull an Eli Manning in 2025.
Yeah.
All right, that is the Dillon Gabriel segment. We'll watch how that unfolds in Cleveland from afar. By the way, one other draft note on from the Ducks standpoint, and I'll just casually drop in here that Junior Bergen did get drafted, Montana Grizzlies superstar punt returner. But the story of the draft, I thought, was Derek Harmon, the
Mm,
Ducks defensive tackle who went number 21 overall to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And his mother has had a variety of health issues, including a stroke when he was at Michigan State. And Ryan Clark, who covers college sports for us, wrote a piece about that in the fall. Spoke to Derek about his relationships with his mom, and then he gets drafted on Thursday and reveals in an interview that night with reporters in Pittsburgh that his mom was at that moment was on life support at a hospital, and that he was going to go straight there, and so he could basically tell her that her boy was drafted into the NFL. And then the next piece of information that we got was that she had passed away. And so there's still some details missing on kind of like how some of this unfolded, but just the simple facts of this, that she lived long enough or was kept alive long enough for Derek Harmon to be able to have this moment, for him to be able to have the full circle of being able to share it with her before letting her go, or before she let go, before letting her go, most likely. Just really powerful and
hmm
really beautiful, and obviously a tragedy for Derek Harmon and his entire family. And what a obviously a collision of emotions, right? Like the best moment of your life and the worst moment of your life happening
hmm
simultaneously. Um, but I just really did want to acknowledge that, because that was, to me, um, one of those stories that comes along that is just so much bigger than sports, and it's so much bigger than Dillon Gabriel versus Shedeur Sanders in the Browns quarterback room, which will whatever is not real life. Like that's not that's it's millionaires fighting for a job that, like, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. But Derek Harmon is experiencing some real world you know
hmm
um, adversity as he enters the NFL, and I had to acknowledge that here because I was moved by that by that story as it unfolded.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Not that this is a surprise, but just what a draft for the Ducks overall. Like,
Hmm.
I gotta give Dan Lanning his flowers in terms of how he has turned that program around, in terms of getting players drafted out of there, which is a real tangible thing that you can show
Yeah,
recruits.
totally.
And I think that dovetails nicely into the spring game, where there were a lot of recruits. It was a great weekend to be Dan Lanning. You get all your recruits out, all these big time recruits out for the spring game, and you're able to say, hey, we just got the most players drafted in a singular NFL draft in Oregon history. So it was a good week to be one Dan Lanning, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, there was obviously a ton of recruits on campus. There were, several, former Ducks who played in the NFL on the sidelines. Jeremy Piven, Ari from Entourage was at the game.
Did you see that he threw out the first pitch at the baseball game the night before?
I did catch a clip of that, and then I saw that Bryce Betcher threw out the first pitch of the game
Yes.
that afternoon after the spring game, which I thought was cool because he was still in his pads. By
Yeah.
the way, I mean, we're all over the place today, but the Ducks baseball, by the way, a 4-game
Yeah.
sweep over the Beavers.
Big time, man.
Look out,
We could have a
look
super
out, boy,
regional in Eugene if they keep this up, which would be really cool.
man!
Because
The
that
Pac-12 tournament is going to be. Oh wait, never mind.
does the Big Ten do a tournament?
I don't know. Does the Big Ten have baseball?
Not really. Yeah. 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 The Big Ten has baseball with the Pac-12 schools that went to the Big Ten. Um.
It's same with track, by the way. Like the Big Ten championships for track are going to be in Eugene this year, and it's like the top teams are all the former Pac-12 schools. Like You're welcome, Big Ten, for giving you a toehold in these other sports that you mostly had, you know, that were not your strong suit.
Not your thing.
Like water
Yeah.
polo. I bet USC's water polo dominance in the Big Ten is going to be unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I was at that. I was at game 4 of that series, and yeah, I mean, it's just. I really hope that Oregon's hosting a super regional this year because that was so much fun 2 years ago. It
Mm-hmm.
was awesome. So I hope that
It
that's.
was
I
awesome
hope.
until they like blew it, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, they blew it. They did blow it. They should have gone to the College World Series, but c'est la vie. It was still a cool environment, and we got 3 games out of it, which was cool. So there you go. Anyways, Oregon spring game. Do you have any thoughts?
Um, I think it's so easy to make too much of a spring game, and
I agree.
it's like, and so my thoughts are mostly that any thoughts I had are kind of irrelevant, um, or probably premature. Um, I thought Austin Novosad was the best quarterback on the field, which is kind of fun looking ahead to the fall. But I mean,
Mhm.
Dante Moore is the quarterback at Oregon. There's been nothing that has happened that makes me be any less confident in that,
Yeah.
including the fact that, by the way, who was the first player to come out and talk to reporters after the spring game? It was Dante Moore. Like, if that had been somebody else, I wouldn't have necessarily made much of it. But the
Yeah.
fact that it is Dante Moore, the presumptive, replacement to Dillon Gabriel, like that's the guy at Oregon. He came to Oregon, essentially sat for a year after being a starter at UCLA. He could have gone a lot of places and been a starter. Came to Oregon to be a backup to Dillon Gabriel. He is the guy at Oregon. He is the guy. But I thought Austin Novosad looked really, really sharp. And people forget that he was a highly touted recruit as well when he came to Eugene.
Mhm.
So I'm going to be curious to see how that plays out going forward. If Austin ends up staying in Eugene beyond next season, because it's probably a guy who should be playing. Transfer portal dominates everything, so who knows? But I thought that was good to see because Dante Moore is a bit of a question mark. He is a bit of a what's the
Wild card?
yeah, I mean, like, when he's good, he's really, really good. But,
Yep.
when he was a true freshman, 17 years old playing at UCLA, like, he wasn't always really, really good. So it's going to be interesting to see how, like, he kind of evens out after a year of seasoning behind Dillon. So, quarterbacks, the biggest takeaway, though, and from talking to people around and not just, what you see on the field, this defense is legit.
Mhm.
And it needs to be, as we saw late in the year last year. The Ducks defense was very good last year, and you know it put some guys in the NFL, but including Derek Harmon. But when push came to shove, when the rubber hit the road, you know
They
the
wilted.
Ducks couldn't handle Ohio State. And by the way, the Ducks defense also really couldn't handle Penn State and won in a shootout in the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah.
It gave up 523 yards and the 300 yards of rushing against Penn State. So I'm looking for this defense to take a big step this year. I think that's necessary if the Ducks are going to remain in the national title conversation, especially with a young quarterback and, replacing a bunch of, obviously high quality receivers, replacing Jordan James in the backfield. Now, I do think that they've got a loaded backfield. I think the running backs are going to be pretty good. So questions are on the offensive line. Questions are a little bit with the playmakers offensively, but the defense is what has kind of ruled the spring, and people are expecting to be the calling card of this Oregon team. Which, by the way, about dang time for a Dan Lanning team, because this is Dan Lanning's 4th year we're going into, and this is the former national championship calling defensive coordinator of at Georgia, and the defenses have been good under Lanning and Tosh Lupoi. But I think we're still waiting for that first, like, really, truly great Oregon defense under Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoi, and maybe this is it.
Um, interesting thoughts about Austin Novosad and Dante Moore. I can understand where you're coming from with Austin. But he wasn't that much better than Dante Moore, like you said. It wasn't like one of those things where any of us were blown out of the water. I did think it was really interesting how they how they rotated the quarterbacks in this year.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the past they have not done that.
Yeah.
It's been like the two guys, the starter and the backup, who play the entire first half.
Right.
And this year, it was all about, this year it was just rotating, which I found to be very, very an interesting departure in logic.
Well, I liked it because it allowed both Austin and Dante to lead, have opportunities to go win the game at the end.
Yeah.
And to be in, pressure situations, and run a 2-minute offense. And, Novosad obviously got, whatever team combat boots or whatever they were called. The fighting ducks, the combat duck.
Combat ducks.
It's cool, but like, it's not like, I never did figure out who was which team. But it's like you got to see a lot of Luke Moga, but then, when it came to it, it was, Austin and Dante on the field at the end of the game, which I thought was good for fans. And I thought was, good for the Ducks too, in terms of having, having as close to a real game experience as you could have.
Yeah. I always think that there is normally one player in these spring games where something happens where you're like, okay, there's might be something there. And if there is one player who was that, it was Kenyon Sadiq. I mean, that guy, there is a lot of hype around him. There should be more. Like, he is going to have an incredible year, I think. And, he's kind of been laying in wait a little bit at that tight end position and waited out Patrick Herbert and Terrence Ferguson. And yeah, I think that was my big takeaway from the spring game is Kenyon Sadiq is about to have a monster year. So that's what I came out the most excited about. I mean, he had over 100 yards receiving as a tight end, which is kind of crazy. And he hurdled a guy, which always is exciting.
Yeah.
We love a Kenyon Sadiq hurdle.
Yeah. What was the Big Ten championship was the signature hurdle.
Yes. Where it's becoming his, for lack of a better word, signature is the hurdle, which, man, that's great. Except for the fact that I know it scares coaches because they're afraid he's going to get hurt when he does it.
Yeah.
So I understand that. I understand that thought process, and maybe, hey, Kenyon, maybe not all the time. But yeah, that was my biggest takeaway is that Kenyon Sadiq is going to be an absolute men amongst children on the field next year. So get ready.
Yeah, and no question, he was great. I thought he was great at the end of last season as well, and was maybe underutilized, just given the embarrassment of riches they had.
Yeah.
Both in terms of receivers and at tight end. By the way, Terrence Ferguson going to the Rams. Speaking of the draft, there was some chatter that the Rams nearly used a first-round pick on him. They liked him that much, so it'd be kind of fun to watch that unfold. But yeah, I mean, Kenyon Sadiq is going to be a go-to target for Dante Moore. There's just absolutely no question. And by the way, I got to say, I love seeing a kid from Idaho Falls, Idaho, making moves like that, because it doesn't happen all that often. Even though we went to Skyline, we are an Idaho Falls High family in this house.
I was going to say Idaho Falls.
We are an Idaho Falls High family. Go Tigers. Going to win the Emotion Bowl this year. Do you know what the Emotion Bowl is, Brenna?
I am not privy to the Emotion Bowl. I only am privy to North Idaho sports rivalries, not South Idaho sports rivalries.
Eastern Idaho. You could ask Kenyon Sadiq. Next time you interview Kenyon Sadiq, why don't you ask him about the Emotion Bowl? It's the rivalry between Idaho Falls High and Skyline, which is a huge deal in Idaho Falls.
Okay.
Along the banks of the Snake River.
All right. Well, I mean, you could also ask him about that. He sounds like you're interested.
Okay. Brenna, where were you on Sunday during Game 4 of the Milwaukee Bucks series against the Indiana Pacers?
Well, here's your fun fact for our listeners. I don't have cable. So I was sitting at home, but not watching at the time. And yeah, I got a text that was like, this is not, did you see what just happened? This is not good. And my immediate reaction in terms of Damian was, I think, what everyone's immediate reaction was. And, you know, this just is what it is. Having an Achilles tear at this age is extremely difficult to come back from. And I feel for Dame. It's just kind of been such a star-crossed career for him, you know? They get close to the Western they get to the Western Conference Finals. They get close-ish. You know, they even though that series didn't go the way they wanted to, they really did compete well in it. They just kind of couldn't get it together in the second half against Golden State. And then, you know, eventually, you know, he asked to leave, which I think we all understood, and it just has not gone according to plan so far, to say the least. So, I feel for the guy.
What you just said is where my head went, which is the idea that he had to leave and that it hasn't gone well. And what I think is the most poignant piece of this is that there was an understanding and acceptance locally in Portland that Dame had to leave so he could have a chance to win. And that was the thing that everyone accepted and they wanted for Dame. But they also, you know, I wrote it in this way, and then I had a lot of readers say that, you know, that it resonated. Like, fans needed it for themselves too. They needed to have this belief that Dame was like going off to achieve something greater that he was going to be able to achieve in Portland with As Constructed. And so they were on that journey with him too. And then the back end of that was this, like, probably a little bit overly idealistic, you know, romantic idea that then he was going to return to Portland at the end of his career. He would have won his championship and he would come home. And that can still happen. He can still come home. But the most romantic version of this is gone, because now, you know, Dame is going to miss most, if not all, of next season. He is going to absolutely have to opt into the last year of his contract in 2026, 27, which is $58 million. And it puts the Milwaukee Bucks in a really bad position. It puts Giannis Antetokounmpo in a really bad position. There's certainly reason to think that Giannis is going to start looking for an exit, simply because the Bucks are kind of locked in. They can't do much to improve their roster from where it is. And what we've seen is, you know, they haven't been good enough. And now, granted, you know, Giannis missed the first round last year. Dame missed the first 2 games of the series this year, and then rushed back, and clearly wasn't himself.
No.
So there, you know, it's fair to ask if if healthy, what it would look like in the playoffs, but we won't really get a chance to find that out at best until 2027, when Dame is 36, nearly 37 years old.
That out
When Giannis is 32. That's not happening. And so this thing that we all thought in our most, like, you know, dreamlike state is just not going to happen. Yeah. And, you know, Dame might win a championship still in his career, but it's going to be going and signing as a minimum or mid-level exception somewhere that's already ready for a championship, and, like, you know, and providing, you know, that little extra something. He might come back to Portland, but it's not going to be, I mean, it was never going to be the guy, but it's not going to be as, like, you know, a guy who just led someone to a championship, because I think that, you know, Dame can still be a really good player in the NBA. And I have no doubt, you talked about, like, Dillon Gabriel, like, being counted out. Like, talk about Damian Lillard, right? I mean, where he came from, going to Weber State. I mean, it's the entire ethos of the guy, you know, like, don't count him out. And so I believe that he will come back, or he will do everything he can to come back the best player he can still be. The problem is that this injury is a basketball soul snatcher. Like, there's only so many guys who've come back and been able to even still play, let alone at an all-star level. Kevin Durant is the exception. Dominique Wilkins is the exception. You know, Kobe Bryant did this and it wrecked him. Klay Thompson has been wrecked by this injury. DeMarcus Cousins, wrecked by this injury. Rodney Hood, not the same player, as Blazer fans very well know. So, you know, that's not to say that Dame can't come back and still be very valuable, but like his explosiveness, his quick twitch, like that's all like what makes him great. Um, and that's the sort of thing that you worry about going away with an Achilles. So, um, obviously hope the best for him. But I think the dream is kind of over. And I think that that's a hard thing to process if you're a Blazer fan.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that now because of the Damian trade, where the Blazers were in a position where they basically, you know, I don't think we're putting any sort of lip service here into the idea that the Blazers also needed to trade Damian. Like it was just time to move on for both
Oh, I think
parties.
this is even greater proof that it was the right thing to do. Not
Yeah,
because you could predict an Achilles, but just because building around 34, 35-year-old players gets a little bit dicey because
yeah,
more things go wrong. And if they go wrong, you have fewer outs. If a
yep,
27-year-old blows an Achilles, you at least can like wait and see what he looks like when he comes back.
yeah.
You can't with Dame. But yeah, go ahead.
And especially with that amount of money that's, given to somebody at that age. So it's funny that now the Milwaukee Bucks find themselves in a similar position as the Blazers in terms of we don't really have any other moves other than to trade our all-star. Especially with it's been talked about to death, but their draft pick situation is real rough.
Thanks to the
Um,
Blazers.
yep. So it is it's very interesting to see this all kind of come around again for Damian, but in a bit of a different way. Yeah, the whole thing is really disappointing and sad. How many franchise players leave a franchise and the fan base wants them desperately to get a championship with their next team. It's not that common.
Yeah, I mean, the Spurs weren't like, or Spurs fans weren't going crazy for the Raptors, when Kawhi was there. Kevin Durant is a pariah in Oklahoma City. The one exception might be Russell Westbrook, just because OKC fans love Russell Westbrook so much. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a very unique dynamic.
Yeah.
And, um, even though Dame asked for a trade, fans blame the organization, not Damian, for reasons that we've probably unpacked many times on the podcast. But um, they fans here will be rooting for him to recover and come back, and that will all continue. The Giannis piece of this is interesting, and this injury I think really does give the Blazers a lot of power in the NBA, because you could sort of short the Bucks and be like, not sort of, you could pretty confidently look ahead and be like, the Bucks in 2028, 29, 30, those could be pretty good picks. But that was before you basically sped up their rebuild to like now. Now
Yeah.
it's like, oh shit, they're screwed. Dame is going to miss all of next year, and then he's for sure going to be on the books through 2027, meaning that the year that you get Dame off the books, 27, 28, is the first year that the Blazers control your draft pick, because the Blazers have swap rights in 2028 and 2030. That means that if, based on draft order in the lottery, the Bucks have the 7th pick and the Blazers have the 20th pick, the Blazers can have the 7th pick. In
Yep.
2029, the Blazers have the Bucks pick no matter where it is, plus their own pick. 2030, swap rights again. So conceivably, like just hypothetically, the Blazers could be the best team in the league in 2028, 29, and 30, win 3 straight NBA championships. The Bucks could be the worst team and get 3 number 1 overall picks in the lottery. And the Blazers could add the number 1 pick in the draft each of those years. This is like the extreme version of the hypothetical or the
Yeah.
theoretical scenario. But that's why the Blazers are in such a position of strength with ownership of these picks, because the Bucks are now screwed. And it almost hastens the Bucks' need to start the clock on their rebuild, so
Yeah.
they can be not so terrible in 28, 29, and 30, that those picks are just awesome. But it's going to be really hard. And I threw this out there, and like, I don't think the Blazers are going to trade for Giannis. I just want to be clear. But I think that it's worth exploring both from the outside perspective and internally, because there is a version of this roster with Giannis Antetokounmpo that's very interesting. Now, he's not going to want to come here.
No.
It's not going to be on his list. And the Blazers don't have the most assets to go get him. They don't have the assets that OKC, Utah, Brooklyn, Houston have. And frankly, they don't have the young players. You know, any trade that Milwaukee makes, they're going to want like a centerpiece young player that you can sell to your fans. The Blazers don't have that. It's not Donovan Clingan. It's not Shaden Sharp. It's not Scoot Henderson. You could potentially build a package around Denny Avdia. You could potentially build a package that includes Toumani Camara. I still don't know that that's beating anything out.
No.
But here's what the Blazers have. And I think it could become very valuable and could help them with the Bucks or anyone else. They have the 3 picks in the league that are the most valuable to Milwaukee. So Oklahoma City could give, like, I think I looked, by the way, that Brooklyn could trade 12 picks, like 12 firsts in a Giannis trade if they wanted to. Like, they could just be like, here's all of them that would be tradable would be 12. Like, ridiculous. The Blazers have 6, plus those swaps. But the Bucks pick and the swaps may be the 3 most valuable picks to Milwaukee in the entire league. So if the Blazers were to engage with Milwaukee and say, hey, you know, we're going to give you a package for Giannis and it includes you getting your picks back, like, the Bucks would have to at least consider the possibility that getting those picks back is more valuable than anything else they could get in a trade for Giannis. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's probably going to be a lot better offers out there, but I think it's something to be mindful of as the Giannis situation plays out.
Giannis would not be thrilled with that trade.
Here's what I'll say. He would love playing with Denny and Toumani. I don't think you could get him without trading one of Denny or Toumani. But the version of the Blazers that has Giannis Antetokounmpo on it would probably have a place for Anthony Simons suddenly. Maybe you could talk yourself into DeAndre Ayton for a year, because you just need some offense. You would just need scoring. And maybe you would make DeAndre Ayton shoot threes. I don't know. But it's an interesting thought exercise. I recognize the unlikelihood of it. But it is also the sort of thing that I hope the Blazers are kicking around. And it's like, how do we take a jump, not just to good? Like, if there is a way to get great, let's get great. But again, I recognize that it is a highly unlikely. See, a pipe dream is like, I think pipe dream is too extreme. Like, pipe dream to me is totally unrealistic, and like, we're just sitting around and we're bullshitting. Well, we are bullshitting, but like, it's like, pipe dream is like 0% and kind of a waste of time. I think it is a useful exercise to explore the just to explore it from a 360 degree perspective. Like, what would it take? What would you be willing to do? What would it look like if you did? And I think there's potentially a lane, but I think it's, again, highly, highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Speaking of Toumani Camara, by the way, you had some news that I had missed this morning until we hopped on the podcast. You want to go ahead and explore that or explain that?
I mean, Sean Highkin reporting that that Toumani Camara is going to be their representative at the draft lottery, the Blazers representative at the draft lottery, which, you know, I guess I want to preface this by saying, who really cares? Who really cares if who's going to the draft lottery? It doesn't really matter. You know, this is all silly, superstitious stuff we're discussing. But I'm kind of underwhelmed by the whole thing. I don't know. Like, it seemed pretty obvious that with the organization bringing back Greg Oden, once this year officially, I don't know if Oden came back on his own the second time or if that was a organizational decision the second time as well. But certainly seemed like they were kind of heading towards that direction, which I was a fan of, having Greg Oden go to the draft. That didn't work out. And obviously, like, there's schedules and things, so you just don't really know what's happening. But if we're going current players that I want to send to the draft to be in
Lottery.
the lottery, sorry, excuse me, the draft lottery, it's a no-brainer that it's Donovan Clingan to me. And that's because Donovan Clingan's mom and Cooper Flagg's mom go way back. I think they both played at Maine together. And yeah, like, I mean, if we're gonna go, dang, if we're gonna go the superstitious route, let's go full bore on it. Send Donovan. So, oh well.
Yeah, I think it's a good point about Klingon and their moms. It might be a little on the nose to be like, we're sending him because he has a connection to Cooper Flagg, who we want to draft, and you're setting yourself up for disappointment with your whatever, like 4% odds of actually getting that pick. But lottery representative to me is one of those things that like can matter if you do something like big, like Greg Oden, and I thought was really meaningful when they sent Brandon Roy 2 years ago. But you watch that thing, and most often it's like, our recent rookie or our owner who nobody has ever actually seen in public. And, to me, it would be most meaningful if, yes, Odin, sure. I don't know exactly what message sending Greg Oden sends quite, but because that didn't work out. But
Yeah.
obviously winning the lottery was very important. I think, if Jody Allen suddenly was like, I want to be front and center and forward facing and be out there, that would be interesting. But I think if you are going to send a young guy and you don't want to go the Klingon route for whatever reason, maybe he's getting his tonsils out that day. I mean, Tumani Kamara, again, I cannot ever not say Tumani Kamara. It's just one name for me. Tumani makes sense. Like, he is the guy the Blazers are trying to elevate into more of the national discourse. The guy that they're trying to make more of a household name. Is he going to be the face of the franchise? No. They don't have that go to superstar yet, unless you think that Denny is going to continue growing into that. But Tumani's a guy that I think they want to make sure is more visible, more out there, more on people's radars. Received votes for most improved player, as did Denny. Still has a good shot of being on an all defensive team. To me, it's really more of just a visibility play to get him out there and to make people more aware just of him. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting. I always am interested in how these decisions are made and, what these conversations are like in the boardroom as they're sitting around kicking it around, because, and also what is it a thing where it's who's available, who can we send, versus it's very focused, we want to do this because it sends a specific message. I don't know, but I think Tumani is a good representative for the Blazers.
I just think it's boring, but it's all right. Whatever, I guess.
It's also 4 minutes of television and then it's
exactly.
over.
That's why I prefaced what I said basically, is that, it ultimately, it does not matter who you send to the lottery. You could send a man off the street to the lottery. It would probably not be a big deal, but I like it when there's a little thought put into it.
That's an idea. The Blazers should have a lottery
That
to
would
get
be
to be the
amazing.
Blazers representative to the lottery. So next year, Blazer fans can enter a lottery, and one fan will get selected to represent the Trailblazers at the NBA draft lottery alongside representatives from other teams. This is a great idea. Are you listening, Dwayne Hankins? I know you are.
Oh,
I want
Lordy.
royalties for all these ideas I come up with for the Blazers. I send the Blazers so many free ideas.
Look at you.
including trading for Giannis Antetokounmpo, by the way, like which they probably wouldn't have thought of on their own.
Yeah, yeah, I mean that would be interesting. I don't know if there's rules against the NBA allowing something like that. I have no idea.
It's a made up event. Of course there's no rules. Like it's not like you're signing him to play like point guard. He's
No.
got to sit there and smile. And representing the Portland Trailblazers, Bob.
It would
Bob
be really
from
Portland
Sherwood.
if they. You know what? They should send like, the Unipiper or whatever his name is.
It's too bad we lost Darcel. Darcel could have been a representative for the Trailblazers.
Darcel would have been incredible. But yeah, you get the guy who's on the unicycle who does does the bagpipes. That'd be fantastic.
Okay, so
Let's talking me into lean into the most Portland thing of all time and send that person to the draft. I mean, that would
representing the Portland Trailblazers, Fred Armisen. Yeah,
sure,
no, I like
that. Sounds amazing.
I like where your head's at on this now. Like, okay, I was not underwhelmed by Tumani before, but now that you've convinced me that like we could get a street performer, like one of those like we could get the person with like a typewriter who writes a poem outside of Powell's on their typewriter for $5.
You
we
see
could get that
lady?
person to be the representative. We get like that. That is what I'm talking about. That's the kind of vision, Brenna, that is going to get you promoted from the Oregonian Sports Podcast to like CEO, CMO, Chief Marketing Officer of the NBA.
We workshopped our way here. You had the idea for the fan, and then I was like, well, if we're doing a fan, like we might as well just pick the most Portland thing possible instead. I like the Fred Armisen idea. I like the Unipiper or whatever he's called. I just want someone who embodies Portland up there. Let's really just throw all those suits in the NBA draft lottery room for a loop. If we're going to be Portland, we might as well be the most Portland of Portland. Let's do it.
One thing I wanted to hit on before we left.
Yes.
Shout out to the Hillsboro Hops, an organization that generally does everything pretty right. They're midway through building their new stadium, which we've unpacked in the past, the reasons why they needed a new ballpark 10 years after opening their original one. Basically to save the team and keep them in Hillsboro, they needed to get the facilities up to the MLB standard that was made uniform across minor league baseball in 2020. And that was a very real thing, by the way. Look at Eugene. The Eugene Emeralds will cease to exist after this season, after 70 years. So that was a real thing. They had some media members out for a little walkthrough. I believe Coyne was there.
We were there. I was not in attendance because I had to be down in Corvallis for the Oregon State baseball game.
But shout out to them. One, it is amazing how much they've gotten done since breaking ground in July. And if you drive out the Sunset Highway, you've gone to the coast recently, you've probably seen it. It's gone up like that. It's amazing how much they've gotten done. But also, it's just going to be really nice. It's going to be a great place to watch a baseball game. Like we spent a lot of time talking about, a ballpark on the waterfront, Zidell Yards, and the Portland Diamond Project and that dream, which is sailing through the legislature, and we'll see. But like in terms of like tangible, brick and mortar and steel and iron and concrete thing that's going to be real in our lives starting next spring. This is going to be a gorgeous minor league ballpark. Really cool place to watch a game. Multiple decks, party decks, like very thoughtful fan engagement amenities. Obviously, the facilities for players are going to be top notch. It just was cool to kind of get a look at what that's going to be when it all comes together. And I just would like to give them props for one, making it happen, having the vision to bring it in, and to get it like off the ground and into the ground. It's gonna be cool. By the way, and also ownership is paying for $112 million of the $150 million stadium. So yes, there's a lot of public financing and funding involved, but the owners have figured out how to pay for the bulk of this over time, which I think is also an important note.
Yep, that's a very good note. Yeah, I'm sure I'll be out there for the next tour whenever that happens, because there will be more. I think Reser Stadium had when they were redoing Reser, I think they had about 15 tours of that thing before it was done. So.
I went on one of them. And by the way, by the time people are listening to this, there is a video of me on the tour. So if you want to see me in a hard hat and goggles and a bright vest,
Bill the Builder,
touring the stadium, Bill the Builder, I like that a lot.
I knew you'd like that.
You also will get to see me in VR goggles, which nobody has ever looked cool in VR goggles, but I think I get pretty close. I think I come about as close as you can get to looking cool in VR goggles.
Dust off those shoulders, buddy.
By the way, those videos that we've been making, they don't get made by themselves. They don't get made by me. They get made by Kelly Doyle, who also produces this podcast.
Shout out Kelly!
And she's kind of like, it's like we were joking yesterday, like basically the bulk of her time is like editing videos of me now, which is uncomfortable for both of us. And I was like, there's only so many ways that you can use my eyebrows for comedic effect. So I'm deeply appreciative of the amount of work she's putting into this.
Kelly Doyle, former Coin employee. So there you go. We go way back. Yep. So thank you, Kelly, who probably might be editing this podcast as well. So shout out Kelly.
Probably, definitely.
Yes.
All right. And thank you to our listeners. We know who you are, and we appreciate that you stick around and come back each week. Certainly grateful for that. Brenna, grateful for you. And we will be back next week with more tales from this Oregon sports land.
Great ending.
I think I nailed it that time.